Hello and welcome back. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can take any image in Adobe Photoshop and add a pond or a lake to it. The first thing that you want to do is find a good image. I'm going to use a landscape because after all, that is where you find lakes and ponds. So I found this nice image of a mountain on a stock photography website, and I'm going to go ahead and use that. You can use whichever image you want. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a landscape. Like I said, it can be any image in Adobe Photoshop. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is open up this image in Photoshop, and as you can see, I have mine. The next thing that I actually want to do is go up to File at the top and down to New and create a new blank file. I'm going to call it Ripple because we're actually going to create the ripple effect that we're going to add onto our pond in a little bit. So what I want to do is make the width 1,000 pixels, the height 1,000 pixels. That doesn't really matter a ton. You can mess with that a little bit, but go ahead and follow me for the time being. It's probably a good idea anyway. I have the resolution set to 72 pixels per inch. Color mode's RGB, 8-bit, and the background's white. And I'll go ahead and click OK. Okay, so that's what you have now. Open up your Layers palette if it's not already open, so you can go up to Window at the top and down to Layers and open that up if it's not, like I said, if it's not already open, which it should be by default. Double click on that background layer and click OK to unlock it. Then what you want to do is go up to Filter, down to Noise, Add Noise, and add an amount of 400, add a distribution of Gaussian, and check off Monochromatic, and then click OK. Next thing that you want to do is go back up to Filter, down to Blur, and add a Gaussian blur of 2 pixels. So you have your radius set to 2 pixels and select OK. And now in your Layers palette, click that Channels tab up at the top and then select your red tab, your red channel. This will disable all your other channels so you can only see the red one. The next thing you want to do is go up to Filter, down to Stylize, and Emboss. You want to set the angle to 180 degrees, set the height to 1 pixel, and the amount to 500%, and then click OK. Go ahead and select your green channel after that. And go back up to Filter, down to Stylize, to Emboss. Change the angle to 90 degrees, the height to 1 pixel, and the amount to 500%, and then click OK. And then before you go back to your layers, click on the RGB channel up at the top. It's kind of a master channel, and it'll make all of your channels viewable again. And then go ahead and click on your layers. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit, so I'm going to press Control- on my keyboard to zoom out. Or you can take the zoom on your tool palette and hold down the Alt key and click and drag out. Okay. The next thing that I want to do is go up to the top to Edit, down to Transform and Perspective. And I just want to drag one of these bottom corners out. Keep in mind we're going to overlay this on top of our pond or our lake, so you can kind of set the angle to how you think that should look. And that's about how I want mine to look, so I'm going to double click to set that. Or you could click this arrow and it'll ask you if you want to apply. And I can go ahead and zoom back in again, so I'm going to press Control and the plus sign. Zoom back in a little bit. The next thing that I want to do is go up to Filter, down to Blur, and add a motion blur to this. I want to set the angle to 0 so that it's kind of from side to side, and I'm setting my distance to 66 pixels, but try to make it look kind of like my image here. And I'll zoom in a little bit more on it here after I click OK. So I'm going to click OK on the motion blur, and here, like I said, I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see that a little better. Try to just copy what that looks like, and imagine that it's going to go over the top of your lake and create ripples later. Okay, the next thing that I want to do is I want to save this file, so I'm going to go up to File, down to Save As, and I'm going to name it Ripple, and press save it as a PSD file, and then click Save, and just put it somewhere that you are going to remember it. I've already saved one with this name, so it's asking me if I want to replace that file, and I'm going to click OK. You can just click OK to save it, and then click OK. It'll ask you if you want to maximize the file. Okay, and so now that's saved, and you can click out of it if you want, or you can leave it open, doesn't really matter. And open up your other image that you're going to create that lake. The first thing that you want to do there is double click on the background layer to unlock it, and take that first layer and drag it into your new layer button in your layers palette to copy that, or you can press Control-J on your keyboard. That also would make a copy. The next thing that you want to do is go up to Edit, down to Transform, and flip that vertically, because this is going to be your reflection. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is go up to Image, down to canvas size, and you want to make the height a lot bigger so that you can fit both of those layers into the same area. So what I'm going to do is not quite double it. I'm gonna make mine around 75 inches height, and you can certainly do yours with whatever you feel is appropriate, but add quite a bit. Now I'm selecting both of these layers, and it's just more important to select that original layer, but I'm gonna select both just because, and then I'm gonna drag them both up to the top, all the way to the top. I'll zoom out a little bit so I can see my my entire canvas. And I'm going to select that copy of layer. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and rename it Reflection so that we don't get confused here. And then I'll go ahead and select that layer, and I'm going to drag it down. Next thing that I want to do, and actually I want to go ahead and drag that down a little bit more so that it's about equal. And what I mean by equal is so that this grassy space and this grassy space are about equal. Just so that it looks correct, I guess. The next thing that I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a layer mask to that layer. So I'm going to click the layer mask button on my tool palette, and that's going to add a layer mask there. And then what I want to do is select my gradient tool in my toolbar. If your paint bucket tool is up, just click and hold on that, and you will see your gradient tool pop up. And then what you want to do is make press Q on your keyboard to go into quick mask mode. Or you can press this button over here on your tool palette. That'll take you into quick mask mode as well. And then go ahead and make a selection on that reflection copy, and just kind of click and drag down. You can hold your shift bar or shift key if you want to control that and go straight down. And then just go ahead and make your selection. I'm clicking from about the top of the selection down to the bottom, and you'll have something kind of like that happen. And then click the Q button on your keyboard, and you'll see that there's just a little bit of a selection there made, and that's exactly what we want. So go ahead and go over to your reflection layer and click that layer mask, and then press delete on your keyboard. And that deleted way more than I wanted, so I'm going to press Control Z. And what I'll do is I'm going to select my marquee tool, and I'm just going to move that selection down a little bit so that it doesn't delete quite as much as I want. And I'm going to move it quite a bit down because that deleted way more than I wanted. Okay, so now that I've moved that, I'm going to click on my layer mask again and press delete, and that's quite a bit better. Okay, so now what I want to do is actually click off of that. So I'll just click to the side, or you can press Control D to deselect that. And what I want to do is I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm actually going to just put that underneath both of my layers, and I'm going to call that water, because I'm going to make that layer entirely blue. And I've already got a blue color here, and you can just kind of pick a color, a blue color, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to press I on my keyboard to get my eyedropper, and I'm going to try to find the darkest blue on my image, which is the top right corner here, and I have that blue. And I'm just going to fill that layer with that blue. So I'm just going to click on my gradient tool and hold and get my paint bucket back. And I'm just going to fill that whole layer with that blue. And as you can see, that's just added a little bit more blue to the sky and to the tips of those mountains. Kind of makes it fade out a little bit. And if you don't think that it's fading enough, you could make another selection with that gradient tool and delete a little bit more, or you could erase some out too with a really soft eraser. So just click on your eraser and go up to the top, and make the hardness down to 0, and make your brush size a lot larger. And you can do that up at the top as well. And you can just, if you want, just brush out a little bit more of that image. Make sure that you're on your layer mask if you do that though. Okay, so now that I've gotten that, you can see that I just have a straight line right here. The next thing that I want to do is I want to get rid of that straight line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my marquee tool up at the top, and I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to select my elliptical marquee tool. And I want to make a nice round selection here. And actually, I'm doing that kind of backwards. So I want to make my round selection just like that. And then I want to go back over to my tool palette and select my rectangular marquee tool. And I want to click. Or I'm going to hold shift and click, and I'm going to select the rest of that reflection image. Since we've already created our layer mask, we're actually going to need to select the inverse of this. So I'm going to go up to the top and select to select and down to inverse, or you can press Shift Control I to do that. And you'll see that that's what you get. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, with my layer mask selected, I'm going to press backspace or delete, and you can see that that kind of just deletes those two corners and gives you that nice rounded edge. I'm going to click off to the side to get rid of my marquee tool, or you can press Control D. And then I'm going to take my arrow, my move tool in the tool palette, and just move that up so that there's no open space there. Okay, so now I've gotten that. And there's a nice rounded edge there, and then you can kind of see that these things are starting to reflect each other. Okay. The next thing that I want to do is go up to and actually go ahead and select your regular image there. You don't want your layer mask selected anymore. Select your layer part of the layer, and then go up to filter at the top. Go down to blur, and add a motion blur. And what I want to do is set the angle to probably around 2 pixels, or I think actually maybe a -2 or 3 pixels. And here, actually, let's just play around with that a little bit. I'm going to do a -25 or 27. And then I'm going to make the distance a little bit more significant so that it's quite a bit more blurred, about 230. So I have a -27 angle and a distance of 231. And you can kind of do whatever you need to do with this, or whatever you think looks good. And I'll press OK. The next thing that we're going to do is kind of exciting. We're going to add that ripple back to the water. So with that layer still selected, go back up to Filter, down to Distort, and then to Displace. I have the horizontal scale set to 100 and the vertical scale set to 100. The displacement map is stretched to fit, and undefined areas is set to repeat edge pixels. You can set these two top values at 50 if you want. It's just going to give you a little bit less of that effect. So if it doesn't work, you might, or if it doesn't give you enough of the effect, you just might have to do it again. But I'm going to set mine to 100 because I know that, or I think that's how I want it. So I'm going to press OK. And then I'm going to select that ripple layer that we made earlier from my desktop. And I'm going to open that, and that's going to lay that over the top there, and it's going to give us that nice ripply effect on our water. And as you can see, it's given us a nice kind of ripple there. And if you want to, like I said, if you want to, you can go up to Filter, go down to Diffuse, or Distort, excuse me, and then to Displace. And you can do it again if you want. And this time I'll make it 50. And the scale 50-50, and I'll press OK. And I'll take that ripple and open it, and it'll just make that a little bit more pronounced. Okay, so you can kind of see what that's doing. You can do that as many times as you want. Now, the last thing that I want to do is, since the reflections are never quite the same as they are, you know, as far as perspective and size, what I want to do is I want to select that layer, and I'm going to press Control T on my keyboard to transform, and I'm going to excuse me, zoom out a little bit. I'll press Control minus to zoom out once again, and I'll hold Shift and click one of these corners, and I'll just drag it out a little bit. So I'm going to drag that out, and then what I actually want to do is I'm going to go ahead and just smash this right up. I'm not holding Shift anymore. I'm just going to smash that right up, and it's just going to distort that a little bit more. And I'm just going to drag it over to about where I think that it should be. And I'll double click to go ahead and make that apply. Or you can click the arrow button once again over on your tool palette. And I'm going to zoom back in. Okay, so you can see that this is starting to look like water. If you want it to go more side to side, you can go up to Filter, go down to Blur, and add another motion blur to it. And just make sure that that motion blur is set close to 0. And that'll get you going more side to side. I'm going to take the distance down a little bit because that's adding a little bit too much distortion in my opinion. And I'll click OK, and then I'll add that. So as you can see, there's kind of a lot of playing around that you got to do with this. So now what I want to do is I want to double click on this this layer, and that'll bring up my my layer styles. And I want to add an outer glow to this layer to kind of create an edge around the pond. By default, it's this kind of yellowy color, and that kind of makes it look like kind of a beach. So you can kind of leave that if you want. I'm going to make it black, though, I think, so that I can give it kind of more of an edge. And you can see it kind of affects the edges of all the around the entire image, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to set my blend mode to normal, and I'm going to make the size a lot larger. And I can set the opacity to 100% if you want to see really what you're working with right now for the time being. And then just go ahead and make the size a lot larger so that it kind of blends out a little bit more. Okay. And then after you do that, you're definitely going to want to take that opacity way back down. And I'm going to take mine down until you can't tell really that I've added that black edge there. And that's pretty nice. I think I'll go ahead and leave it kind of like that. Then I'll press OK. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to drag this layer down a little bit. I'm just arrowing it down. I'm going to arrow it down until I start to see blue, and I'll move it back up until I don't see any. Okay, and that's just evening up these two spaces a little bit more and making it look a little bit more realistic. And then the last thing that I think I want to do is make this blue layer a little bit darker, just because I think it's going to look a little bit nicer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that layer. I'm going to just double click on my color over here, and I'm just going to make that blue quite a bit darker, a navy color. And then I'm just going to recolor that layer with the paint bucket. Okay, and actually you see that made it look a lot more real. So you can kind of play around with things like that, and you see that kind of made that dark edge a little bit too dark. So now we're going to have to go in and bring the opacity down a little bit more on that to about like that. And then press OK. If you have a little bit of wispy things around the edge here, you can certainly go into your mask there and kind of take an eraser, and I would make it quite a bit harder, maybe around 85 or 90, and you can kind of brush around the edge there a little bit to make sure that you kind of maintain an integrity of a lake's edge. There you go, and that's about it. So you've made your reflection, you've made your pond, and you can do this with any image that you want in Adobe Photoshop, and it works great. So I hope you've learned something. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I've certainly enjoyed giving it to you once again. Please follow me on Twitter, find me on Facebook and like me there. And please, if you liked this video, click the like button on YouTube. And I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.